If you want to get a cooler, beefier stance on your 2004 and newer F-150 without having to spend a bunch of money to do it, then this front leveling kit will be exactly what you're looking for. Providing you with 3 inches of lift up in the front end, this is going to give your truck some extra height to work with and will level out the stance, giving it a nice injection of attitude. Quick note on fitment here, this kit is designed to fit all 2004 and newer F-150s that are not equipped with the CCD suspension system, also excluding Raptor models. Starting out with the thing that you all want to know, with this kit fitted, you will be able to get up to 33-inch tires on your truck. If you are running high offset wheels though, you may encounter some rubbing, but most are going to fit without the need for other modifications. Now most trucks come from the factory with a bit of forward rake to them, and the F-150 is actually one of the biggest culprits. If you're not familiar with the term, rake refers to the angle at which the vehicle sits if you're looking at it from the side. So if you do look at it completely from the side, you're going to notice that the front end tends to sit a bit lower than the rear. Now some of you might like that, but if you're looking to do any off-roading or you want to add some clearance for larger wheels and tires without going whole hog on a lift kit, something like this is going to be the right option for you. To achieve that lift, we have a pair of spacers that measure just about 2 inches in actual height. Now it's important to remember that suspension lifts are not one-to-one, so the height of the spacer doesn't exactly correspond to how much lift you're going to get. It all has to do with suspension geometry, but these are still going to give you 3 inches of lift in the front end of your truck. They'll insert at the top of your front struts and give you that lift to your front suspension, and it's also going to end up leveling out the stance of the truck. Now raising the front end will result in a better approach angle and better overall ground clearance. It may not be a whole lot, but it is going to make a pretty big difference in the look of your truck too, and in its capability. The other nice part about going with a spacer lift is something this size won't have a negative impact on ride quality. You may notice things are a little bit stiffer, but since you're keeping your factory springs and shocks, and you're not modifying anything in the rear, ride quality will remain pretty much unchanged. Spacers are a pretty simple thing, but it's important that they are made right. These ones are made from CNC machined 6061 aluminum, and they are anodized black for additional protection against corrosion. And unlike welded or fabricated spacers, these are all one piece, so they're very strong, there's no weak points, and they should last the lifetime of your truck. That's also good news if you plan to take your truck off-road, because they should be able to withstand pretty much any obstacle you can throw at them. Pricing for this kit comes in at about $120, which is pretty inexpensive even for a spacer kit. Now you could spend more money for more height, but if you want a simple, effective leveling kit that's going to maintain your stock shocks and stock ride quality, you really can't go wrong here. Installation will come in at a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you about 2 hours or so to complete. Now it is going to require removing some bits out of the wheel well to gain access to the front struts, but overall it's not a hard process. And just remember that once you've got everything bolted back together, you should plan on getting a professional alignment done since you are changing around the suspension geometry. That said, let's head on out to the install bay and we'll walk you through the process step by step.
For this install, you will need a pry bar, a large hammer, a caliper hanger tool, various size ratchets and impacts, a swivel adapter, 5 and 8 millimeter Allen sockets, 8, 10, 13, 17, 18, 21, and 22 millimeter sockets, a flathead screwdriver, 8, 13, 15, and 18 millimeter ratcheting wrenches, a 21 millimeter wrench, pliers, a bungee cord, a magnet, some locator bolts, and also not shown here is a jack and jack stands and a spring compressor. All right, today we're going to be installing a lift kit on our F-150, so let's get started. All right, so what we're going to need to do for this is remove basically our entire hub assembly to gain access and give ourselves enough room to get our strut out and get our new one in with our spacer, which is pretty tall. So we're going to start by removing the brakes, and we'll remove the rotor, and then we'll work our way inward, basically removing everything in our way. We're going to start with our 8 millimeter and 10 millimeter sockets, getting our lines off of our knuckle and our chassis. Now I do have a caliper hanger tool. I'm going to place that right here. That's going to hold our brake caliper when we pull that off, as to not hang it on our brake line itself. So I've got my 8 mil socket first. I'm going to remove our ABS bolt, and I'll grab my 10 mil, remove our brake line bolts. Now we're going to remove our caliper, so we need to remove the 2 13 millimeter bolts holding that on. We've got our 13 millimeter socket, pop that off. Support your caliper. This other one out. We'll get our caliper off. We'll hang that up. Now once we have our caliper off, we can remove our pads as well. Those out. Sometimes this inner one tends to be a little stubborn, so we'll grab a screwdriver and kind of work that out. So we got a screwdriver, and we're just going to gently push on this. You don't want to score your pad at all. Sometimes your clips tend to fall out with it. So you keep track of that. And if it does fall out, just pop it right back in. Now we can remove our bracket that's held in by these two 21mm bolts. So we've got our 21mm socket, our ratchet. Get these off. And we're going to break them loose with this. And we'll run them out with our power ratchet. Now you'll want to support your bracket. Run this other bolt out. You can remove your bracket and remove your bolt. Now we can remove our rotor itself. Next we'll need to remove our dust shield, which is held on by these three 8mm bolts. So we've got our 8mm socket, we'll pop those off. Pull our dust shield aside. Next we can remove our wheel speed sensor with our 5mm Allen socket. Get your bolt out. You want to very gently work this out of its seat. We'll work this out. We'll just lay this out of the way. Next we can remove our axle nut cover with a pair of pliers. Pop that off. Now we use our 13mm socket to remove our axle nut. Next we'll remove our tie rod from our knuckle. We're going to use our 21mm socket for that. We'll bring it out to where it has a few threads still on it. Sometimes these pop themselves out. Now while we have our 21mm socket, we're going to loosen our lower ball joint nut. You want to keep this on a few threads. That's going to catch your knuckle when we loosen that up. Now we're going to give our tie rod end a few gentle taps, or you can use a ball joint service tool. Pop that out. Now we're going to remove our upper ball joint nut with our 18mm socket and swivel. Now we're going to give this a few taps to unseat our ball joint. Now sometimes you can get lucky. The shock from doing this will also release your lower ball joint. Now we're going to pull our two vacuum lines off of our hub. They just pop back like so. Get those out of the way. Now we're going to get our nut off of our upper ball joint. That one out. We're also going to remove the nut on our lower ball joint. We'll get this off. Work our knuckle out. Sometimes you'll need to push up on your control arm. Carefully remove your hub. Now that we have our hub out, we are going to throw a bungee cord underneath our axle so it's not just drooping down, because we're going to be moving this a lot. Bring that up. And just hook it up out of the way, just to support the weight. You don't need to do anything crazy. Now we're going to remove our sway bar end link nut with our 18mm socket. Now we're going to remove our lower strut mounting bolts. So ours have through bolts. They no longer have the factory studs, which you should use your 18mm socket for. In our case, we're going to use a 21mm wrench and a 22mm socket for our nut. Get both of these off. All right, so now that we have our lower mounting portion off, we're going to remove our three upper mounting nuts with our 15mm ratcheting wrench, and then we'll pull our strut out. Once you got your third one loose, you want to support your strut. Get this last nut off. Pull this out. Now once you got this side off, you can repeat the same process for the other side. All right, so now that we have our strut out, what we're gonna need to do is actually rotate our top hat 180 degrees to allow for our mount to go onto the top hat and line up with our factory mounting points. So we've got our strut in our spring compressor, just enough to relieve the tension on the top hat, so we'll bring that down a little bit. And again, you can use a handheld spring compressor if you need one. They're available for rental at any automotive parts store. We're going to use an 8mm ratcheting wrench to turn our top stud. It's the easiest place to grab it. Sometimes that's a little stiff. Sometimes you can take the whole top hat and turn it itself. And we'll finish spinning this. And a good point of reference is you want your single side stud to line up with your bottom mounts. Make sure that's good. And we can relieve our tension. Once you have this one rotated, you can do the same thing for your other strut. So now we're going to grab our spacer, get that mounted onto our top hat, and get our hardware in place to lock this in. Now you have recess holes and threaded holes. The bottom of your recess holes is going to go onto your top hat like so. Then we need to get our flat washers, lock washers, and nuts onto our mounting studs. Now these can be a little bit tricky to do. I highly suggest you grab a small magnet like so. You'll be able to get these onto your studs. And we'll get one of our nuts on. You can actually start that with your magnet. Once you got that first one on, you can do the other two, and then we'll come back and tighten these down. Now once we've got all those on, we'll tighten those down with our 17mm socket. Now you'll notice these are through bolt mounts instead of the traditional studs like we have on our factory top hat. So to make things a little bit easier, I've got two bolts with the heads cut off of them of the same thread pattern. We're going to thread these two in. This is going to help locate our mounting point. So that we have those two in, we can start installing our strut. Now we'll get our strut in place. You may have to push down on your control arm. Get that in. Then we'll get our first provided 8mm Allen head bolt in place. May have to move this around a little. Now we've got our first one started. I did take a locator out. It's the easiest way to get your first one in. Get this threaded in hand tight. Then we'll do the same thing for the other two. So now that we've got our top bolts in, we're going to get our bottom bolts in. Now, doing this at home with your factory studs in, unless you press them out, you might have to pull down or even loosen your lower control arm. Get these started. Okay, and we'll get our bottom mounting nuts and washers on. Again, these should be 18mm for your factory studs. And we'll tighten these back down. And for us, we're gonna again use our 22mm socket and 21mm wrench. Now we're going to tighten down our upper mounting bolts with our 8mm Allen socket on a ratchet. And you can do the same thing for the other two. Now we're gonna get our knuckle back on. So what we're gonna do is line up our lower ball joint and roughly our axle first. Get that hooked back over. Sometimes your axle doesn't want to cooperate, that's okay. If not, just come to the side. Just get our nut back on our lower ball joint. We're gonna line our axle back up. Now once you've got your axle back through your knuckle, you can reinstall your axle nut. We'll tighten that back down with our 13mm socket. Now we're going to tighten down our lower ball joint nut, again with our 21mm socket. All right, so now we've got the vehicle lowered down. I've got a floor jack underneath our lower ball joint because we're going to need to assist this going up high enough to get our upper ball joint for our upper control arm back in our knuckle. Because if you try to just bring this down, it will contact the spring way before this gets all the way through. So what we're going to do, kind of line this up. Bring this up a bit. So now we've got our ball joint through enough to get our nut back on. And we'll grab an 18mm ratchet wrench and tighten this back down. Now if this starts to spin, you can grab an 8mm wrench and grab hold of your stud, so we'll do that now. Now that we have this back together, we can install our tie rod back into our knuckle. Line this up, you may have to move your knuckle around. It is going to be a little bit stiff. That drop through. Knuckle back on, and we'll tighten that back down with our 21mm socket. Now we'll get our sway bar end link nut back in place. Grab our 18mm socket and tighten that back down. Next, we're going to reinstall our vacuum actuator lines for our four-wheel drive as well as our wheel speed sensor. So again, these just line up on the nipples on the back side of your hub. It's pretty hard to see unless you're right in here. They just line up and get pushed back on. No clamps or anything. We'll get our wheel speed sensor. Also, now would be a good time to clean it off. If it's got any corrosion or debris on it. Back in, reinstall our bolt. We'll grab our 5mm Allen socket and tighten that back down. Now we're going to reinstall our axle nut cover. It just pops back in. And we'll reinstall our backing plate. Get this in place. Line that back up. We'll get our 3 8mm screws back in. And we'll grab our 8mm socket and tighten these back down. Now we'll get our rotor back in place. Now to hold this straight, we're going to grab a lug nut and thread that on just to hold this a little bit more square. Now we're going to reinstall our caliper bracket. Get this line back up. Reuse our 21mm bolts. And we'll tighten these back down with our 21mm socket. Now we can reinstall our brake pads. So you just line your ears of your pads up. Pop those back into place, make sure it sits flush on your rotor. You can do the same thing for the inner pad. Now we can get our caliper back in place. Work that on. We'll reinstall our 13mm bolts. Now we'll tighten these back down with our 13mm socket. So now we can get our brackets back on. So we've got our 10 and 8mm sockets. Now once you have this side on, you can repeat the same process for the other side. Always remember to torque your hardware down to the manufacturer specifications, and you definitely want to take your vehicle in for an alignment after you finish this install. Alrighty, that about wraps up our review and install of our 3-inch front leveling lift kit for your 04 and newer F-150 without CCD system, excluding the Raptor. Thanks for watching, and as always, for everything F-150, keep it right here at AmericanTrucks.com.